Hey guys, welcome back to the DrCliffAuD vlog. This is vlog number 91, and today I'm going to be talking about the over-the-counter hearing aid proposed guidelines that were released here this past week on, I believe it was October 19th, which was Tuesday. If you saw my YouTube short, you were already aware that this was released. Well, I have taken the liberty of reading through the entire 114-page document today. I'd rather do other things with my Saturday, to be quite honest with you, but I'm going to give you my thoughts, and to help me do that, I am going to go ahead and bring my computer over here because I was typing notes the entire time, probably driving my wife, Ashley, absolutely crazy with all the clicking that was going on today. So, if you guys could do me a huge favor though, if you are in full support of me spending my entire Saturday working, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. And if you guys are sick of hearing me talk about how I use up all of my weekend time to do work-related stuff, give this video a thumbs down, and then I'll have an idea of how you guys feel about my work-life balance. That being said, let's go ahead and get right into this particular document. So, this document, we've been waiting for this for like, what, 4 years at this point, just waiting for these preliminary guideline like recommendations to define what is an over-the-counter hearing aid and, you know, what criteria needs to be followed to create this category, and then what, you know, hearing aid manufacturers' responsibilities will be to create these devices, and then what the regulatory environment's going to be, like a whole bunch of different things that has all just been total speculation up until this point. Now, I'm going to get into my thoughts of different things that they put inside of this 114-page document. I have it whittled down to 7 pages of notes, which might take me a little while for me to get through all of this. So if you want to grab a drink, grab some popcorn, do whatever you got to do. This video is probably going to take a while, and it's probably going to cost me a small fortune to get custom closed captions done for this video, but it's totally worth it. I've been waiting a really long time for this to happen, so I'm going to enjoy this, all right? So, just so you know, when they essentially released this on Tuesday, they had a little marketing call, or they had like a call that different, you know, media individuals could ask questions to a panel of individuals who helped with the creation of this to provide a little bit more clarification. There was not that much clarification provided in that video, to be honest with you. A lot of it was, well, we'll just have to wait and see after the comment period, which technically started on Tuesday, October 19th. It's a 90-day comment period. It could have been all the way up to 180 days, I believe, but they decided to keep it at 90 days, which I'm actually in favor of. Now, just so you know, you can actually submit essentially a comment to the group of individuals creating these guidelines. So what I'm about to talk about today, these are proposed guidelines, but a lot of this stuff could change based on input that myself, other professionals, other consumers choose to send in to this committee who's going to be formulating these. And you can do it one of two ways. You can submit it electronically, or you can actually submit a written letter. And I will go ahead and link in the description of this video how you can actually submit electronically, or where you need to send your letter in order to have them actually see it and review it. Now, the contents of this actual proposal, there's a bunch of different sections for this, but in general, you have the background, the legal authority, description of the proposed rule, findings regarding pre-market notification, proposed effective and compliance dates, preliminary economic analysis of impacts, analysis of environmental impact, Paperwork Reduction Act of 1995, federalism, consultation and coordination with Indian tribal governments, and the references. And I know a lot of the different researchers who had publications that were used. I greatly appreciate all their time and effort to conduct all of the research necessary to compile, to create this particular document here. All right, let's move on. So let's talk about the background and the purpose of this. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody, but there are 30 million individuals in the United States who have hearing loss. Only 1 in 5 individuals who could benefit from hearing aids actually uses hearing aids, and there are a variety of different factors that lead to this. You know, anywhere from the price, the stigma, perceived value for what you're getting, access to care, so on and so forth. But there's a lot of different things that actually reduce the acceptance rate of hearing treatment. Even when you go to countries that provide all of their citizens with, national health care that includes hearing aids, inside of that, the adoption rates are not very much higher than the United States. So, I know that price is a factor in limiting people, seeking out hearing treatment, but it's not the only factor. Now, I do believe that this proposal, the main focus is to address the price of hearing aids. And so that's why they're creating this over-the-counter. That's why they created the Over-the-Counter Hearing Aid Act. And so this proposal is designed to address the price and to hopefully protect the public and limit the barriers to hearing health. The cost benefit, so the savings could be anywhere between $5 and $145 million per year, and presumably that is for the consumer, because there are actually incurred costs by the manufacturers who have to comply with these regulations, basically. Now, the purpose is to define and establish general controls for an over-the-counter hearing aid category and to provide reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness and to improve access and foster innovation in hearing technology. So that's one of the other concerns, is that, everything's been such like a good old boys club in terms of how everyone looks at this. A lot of people call it like a monopoly, certain hearing aid manufacturers, and some people say that there's no incentive for them to continue to provide effective hearing aid technology, or innovative rather hearing aid technology. I'm not necessarily buying that, because there's a huge profit motive currently for hearing aid manufacturers to create really amazing hearing aids, which we of course have at our disposal today. So it is what it is, but I do like the idea of this aspect of kind of opening up creating regulation to deregulate the industry, if that kind of makes sense at all. But anyway, the need for regulation, if we boil it down, increases access to hearing treatment. They use a lot of words like could, might, and likely. So when you actually review this document, they believe, or they think that this could result in more individuals treating their hearing loss. They believe that it's likely that it would lead to that, or that it might lead to that. None of it is definitive. You would have expect to see, a lot of the research saying that, oh, this would definitely lead to more individuals pursuing hearing treatment. And at the end of the day, these guidelines do not guarantee that it's going to have any positive impact, even though we suspect that it might have a positive impact from an overall treatment acceptance rate and access to care and affordability of care, so on and so forth. So we'll have to wait and see, I don't know, years down the road, whether or not the adoption rate in the United States at least has increased due to these regulations. Now, the definition of an over-the-counter hearing aid, according to this document, the FDA Act defines OTC hearing aids in part as devices available over-the-counter without supervision, prescription, or other order, involvement, or intervention of a licensed person to consumers through in-person transactions by mail or online. Section 520Q2 of the FTC Act requires that such devices be subject to the regulations FDA issues for them in accordance with Section 709B of the FDARA. So that is a lot of jargon in there, but basically an OTC hearing aid is going to be any type of device that you can just purchase over the counter without having to see a hearing care professional. Now, it's not to say that a hearing care professional couldn't also dispense these or sell these or be involved with over-the-counter hearing aids to some degree. It's going to be similar, in my opinion, as readers are inside of optometry. You can go to an optometrist and get readers, and typically readers just like off the shelf, but they'll also be dispensing prescription readers, so on and so forth. So at least that's how I'm interpreting this. Now, they have defined, not defined, but self-fitting air conduction hearing aids. That is basically what they're calling OTC devices. They will require 510(k) clearance by the FDA, which is a pre-market submission to the FDA to demonstrate that the device is safe and effective. Now, as of right now, there is, I believe, one device that has 510(k) marketing approval, which is the Bose Sound Control hearing aid. I do believe that officially that will be the first OTC device that is available as soon as we get through the comment period and the final rule, and then that period of time after the final rule, which I'll get into here later in this video. But the labeling indicates that the device's intended use is to treat hearing loss, if a device has labeling that says it's intended to treat hearing loss, it would fall under this regulation even if they do not call them hearing aids. So a lot of these different amplifiers that are out there that are technically personal sound amplification devices, if they say that they're used to treat hearing loss, they're technically going to have to make sure that they comply with these regulations, which is a good thing, which is why I am in 100% full support of over-the-counter hearing aids if the FDA actually regulates it, which is the big concern that I have with all of this, because it doesn't give me a huge vote of confidence, which you'll see later in this document here. Now, we do have a lot of the requirements here, and I'll actually put this up over here, which is why I left this nice big space over here, which it talks about the scope, the definitions, the labeling, which includes the packaging, the labeling inside of the packaging, the labeling on the device itself, and the technical specifications of a device. They have to essentially publish the output limits, the electroacoustic performance to include distortion control, self-generated noise, latency, bandwidth, and smoothness, which I'll get into about those later on here. They will also have design requirements, which means that they have to control for insertion depth so you don't accidentally, rupture your eardrum, things like that, or create a bloody ear canal and all of those great things. They have to have atraumatic materials, meaning the piece that goes inside of your ear cannot cause any trauma to the actual ear canal. They have to have a way to ensure that they're going to be properly fit, whether it's through instructions, whether it's through actual testing to ensure that the device is in its proper depth. And then, of course, they'll have tools, tests, or software that are used to control the devices. There is also going to be a requirement for the condition for sale, effect on state law, and incorporation by reference. And I'll get into those aspects again later in this video. All right, time for some water, because as you can tell, I'm just cranking through this. All right, so consistent with Section 502 of the FD&C Act, all devices would have to have adequate directions for use and adequate warnings against use for certain populations in a conspicuous location on product labeling. This was something that I'm a huge fan of. If they just have the warnings and all of that kind of tucked away somewhere in page 82 of some user manual, there are going to be individuals that actually injure themselves with these devices, or are not aware that these particular devices would not be capable of meeting their needs, or individuals who think that this is the correct treatment option when they actually have a medical condition going on and they need to go see a medical professional. Now, that is part of it. They have to have a recommendation on there to see a hearing care professional for certain situations or conditions, and this is where our 7 red flags come into play. I do have a video talking about the 7 red flags to get hearing aids, or rather that require medical clearance before getting hearing aids, and I will go ahead and put them up here. So if there's visible deformity of the ear, if there's fluid coming out of the ear, pain, history of excessive earwax or something else inside the ear canal, vertigo, i.e. dizziness, sudden, quick, or worsening or fluctuating hearing loss within the past 6 months, or hearing loss or ringing in one ear that is significantly different from the other ear. Any one of those conditions, and you have to go in and see a medical professional or an audiologist to identify what the heck is going on, because there's probably a medical condition going on that would not be appropriately treated with a set of over-the-counter hearing aids. Now, when it comes to advertising, the advertising cannot be misleading, and this has been a huge thing for me over the course of the last four 4.5 years since I've been making content for my channel, which is there's a lot of companies out there just saying whatever the heck that they want to, and no one is regulating them. They're saying that, these are the same hearing aids that they're selling as the big manufacturers, yet they're basically just selling these cheap amplifier devices that could potentially damage your hearing. And it's just absolutely has gotten ridiculous out there. But this is going to be a requirement that there are going to be certain standards under the FDA Act for the legal marketing of safe and effective hearing aid devices. And again, all of these OTC hearing aid devices will require 510(k) clearance from the FDA. So no device could be labeled as an OTC hearing aid or hearing aid at all for that matter, which I'll get into a little bit more later on, if they've not gone through the 510(k) certification process or approval process from the FDA. So they have to be proven as safe and meet all these requirements through the FDA. There is no requirement for a licensed individual to dispense these products. However, this does not prevent a licensed professional like myself from selling these devices if they prove to be safe and effective. I could actually start selling these devices online if I wanted to, and I believe at some point in the future I would like to have a way to get some of the better OTC devices on my website so individuals can actually purchase those and know that those are some of the better ones that are out there. Because trust me, there are going to be bad OTC hearing aids, just like there's bad prescription hearing aids, if you ask me. Now, however, as indicated on page 59 of the proposal, it seems as though if you are a licensed hearing care professional, you would still be subject to state and local laws when dispensing OTC devices. I am not 100% sure about how all this is going to play out, but it does seem ridiculous if that's the case. Meaning, if you are not a hearing care professional, then you can just do whatever the heck you want with OTC devices. You do not have to follow any state regulations, any state laws, or anything like that. But if you are a licensed audiologist, hearing instrument specialist, then you're going to have to uphold your state licensure when dispensing any type of OTC device. Now, there is some potential that a lot of these guidelines are going to supersede state laws, and you'll see a little bit later on, I do need to actually get a lawyer to read through some of this document and tell me what it actually means, because when it comes down to kind of like superseding different state laws and whatnot, it gets a little bit confusing, if I'm being honest. So that might not be a limitation for someone like myself who wants to dispense over-the-counter hearing aids. Now, when it comes down to the symptoms of mild to moderate hearing loss, people are really bad at identifying how severe their hearing loss is. There are some individuals who swear that they have a profound hearing loss, and it turns out they have a mild hearing loss. And then you have some individuals who have a profound hearing loss, and they swear they have no hearing loss at all. So like, it's all over the place. So what they're trying to do is they have these proposed 4 different scenarios that an individual could use to determine if they have a mild to moderate hearing loss or not. And here are the 4. Difficulty hearing or understanding conversations, especially in groups or noisy places, or when you cannot see who's talking. Difficulty hearing when using the telephone, fatigue due to greater listening effort, and needing to turn up the volume of television, radio, or music louder than normal or loud enough for others to complain. So that would be the criteria, or rather, those 4 situations would be the criteria for an individual to determine, would I actually be a candidate for these devices? Well, I do have difficulty watching the TV at a volume that's comfortable for my spouse, so maybe I do have just a mild to moderate hearing loss, and then they would go down the path of attempting to use these particular devices. Because after all, there is no testing requirement for these. Now, when you look at companies like Bose, they do have like a screener on their website. So you could go to some of these companies' websites potentially to identify if you have an appropriate level of loss to be treated by their devices. I do suspect that most companies will not want something like that on their website, because they probably will want individuals who have more than a mild to moderate hearing loss to at least attempt to use their devices, with the potential that they would find at least enough benefit, or they would find it not beneficial but just not return it for a refund. So there's potential there. Who knows? Now, it also has to have information on repair servicing in the labeling inside of the packaging. Now, this is something that I find to be interesting. You know, when it comes down to at my clinic at least, 10 to 20% of appointments on any given day are for individuals who are coming in because of some issue related to their hearing aid, or that their hearing aids need to go in for repair or come into my clinic for repair. So it'll be interesting to see how repairs are actually facilitated, because hearing aids are notorious for requiring a lot of maintenance. It's not like a computer that generally stays functioning without a computer technician all the time. But when you think of a hearing device as something that you use all day, every day, in a harsh environment of your ear canal, and you sweat on it and all of that stuff, there is definite maintenance that needs to be done with those devices, otherwise they're going to malfunction. So I don't know how much repairs would cost. I don't know how it would be facilitated or anything like that. We'll have to see, okay? Now, when it comes to the output limits, so now we're starting to talk about different criteria of a device. This was one of the big ones that were out there for safety of individuals. And when you start looking at OSPL 90, so essentially the maximum output of a hearing aid, they're going to limit it to either 115 dB SPL, which is really freaking loud, and 120 dB SPL, which is also really freaking loud, as long as it has as long as the device has input compression and volume controls available to the user. So if you are on the upper limit of that, of 120, there has to be some controls for you to be able to lower down the volume of those devices. But if there is no volume control whatsoever, they can go all the way up to 115 dB SPL. Now, when you look at the NIOSH guidelines for noise exposure, if you have 115 dB SPL signal for 30 seconds or more, you run the risk of damaging your hearing. That's right, 30 seconds at 115 dB SPL, and it's even less than that when you start looking at a 120 dB SPL sound in terms of noise exposure. Now, you could essentially rip those hearing aids off within a few seconds if you identified that a noise was just too loud, but of course there is the potential that individuals could damage their hearing. They just think that it's unlikely that that would occur if they limit the output to 115, 120. When we're programming professionally programmable hearing aids, we will even get a warning inside of our software saying a hearing aid can exceed 132 decibels and it could potentially damage your patient's hearing. So it's something we have to take into account anytime that we're doing a professional fitting of hearing aids. But of course, there's no professional involved in this, so you're left to your own devices to some degree. Now, the one thing I'm surprised about is that there's no limit on the amount of gain that a hearing aid can provide. Now, the difference between output and gain. So output is the loudest the hearing aid can go, and the gain is how much amplification can be added to an incoming signal. Now, I understand their philosophy that is, well, if you limit the output, it doesn't matter the amount of gain that you put on a signal, because eventually it will cap out at 115 or 120 decibels. I just think there's going to be individuals out there selling these devices that say, you can get up to 90 dB of gain with these hearing aids, even though the maximum output is 120. So it's going to, I think, lead to the potential that individuals could, with a more severe hearing loss than just mild to moderate, could be swayed to purchase these devices if they see that the amount of gain is really, really high, or the potential for gain is really, really high. Now, of course, like you could have a 10 decibel signal and add 90 dB to it and only come out to 100 dB of overall output. But, you just start getting into these ridiculous situations where, from a marketing standpoint or labeling standpoint, I just think it's silly not to limit it to like 50 dB, at the most 60 dB of gain to an incoming signal. That is more than enough for any mild to moderate hearing loss. So it boggles my mind why they wouldn't create a limit on that, but whatever, or recommend a limit on that, but whatever. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other baseline performance standards. I just talked about OSPL 90, I mentioned distortion control limits. This is total harmonic distortion, cannot exceed 5% distortion with a signal that's being tested. And there are specific requirements for the certain type of signal being tested. Now, this is a lot of stuff that we would test inside of an audiology clinic using a test box to make sure that none of these numbers are too high that would indicate that a hearing aid is malfunctioning, or too low that would indicate that a hearing aid is malfunctioning. Now, most hearing aids that I test in the clinic, professional prescription hearing aids will test below 1% distortion with the devices, and they're allowing it to go up to 5% distortion, so allowing more distorted signal to come in through these devices. So that's the upper limit, 5%. Self-generated noise limits, this is the equivalent input noise that we would test inside of the clinic, cannot exceed 32 dB SPL, which I think is really high considering that a lot of individuals with mild to moderate hearing loss will actually be able to hear the noise generated by the hearing aid just by it being turned on. Most hearing aids that I test in my clinic are like below 20 and sometimes even below 16 dB. For a lot of individuals, that's just such a low noise level that you would never be able to detect that the hearing aid is even turned on. So I'm a little surprised that they're allowing such a high equivalent input noise or self-generated noise on that. The latency limit, which is the delay that's created by signal processing, they say cannot exceed 15 milliseconds, which again is really high. When you start looking at some of the really quickly processing prescription hearing aids on the market, you're looking at less than 1 millisecond of processing time. And to allow up to 15 milliseconds is really, really high. Now, technically, for individuals, you shouldn't be able to detect 15 milliseconds, but at the same time, I think that there's nuances to how delay in signal processing, how it makes you perceive things audibly. So I'll leave it at that for right now. You also have the frequency response bandwidth, which is between 250 hertz all the way up to 5,000 hertz. I would like to see it go up to 6,000 hertz, but you know, in most cases, even professionally fit hearing aids struggle to get anything beyond 6,000 hertz of usable gain or usable frequency response, I guess I would say, from their hearing aids. But I would still like to see the requirement be a little bit higher on that as well. Let's see here. Frequency response smoothness. This one's a little confusing. I don't expect the lay person to be able to understand what the frequency response smoothness is when it comes to the technical explanation of it. But basically, you want to see a nice smooth frequency response of a hearing aid. You don't want to see any like weird, jagged kind of response curves when you're doing test box measures. So it's basically just saying you want to have a very even level of amplification throughout the frequency spectrum, and I'll leave it at that for right now. Now, all of these are possible initially when these manufacturers are creating these devices, but over the course of time, all of these degrade to some degree. And that's why, at least in my clinic, we're testing this at least on an annual basis, or anytime that someone's reporting something with their hearing aid that's not due to changes in their hearing and it's not due to a cleaning or maintenance issue of their device. We put their hearing aids in the test box and we identify, hey, these devices that you're wearing are no longer meeting these manufacturer specifications. So, and here's the crazy thing. A lot of times individuals don't even realize that their hearing aids are not creating as good of sound as they possibly could, and we end up telling them, hey, like your devices are malfunctioning, let's put you in some loaner devices, get your devices repaired, and every time that we put them in these loaner devices, they're like, oh, these sound way better than mine. And they had the exact same programming loaded into them. So the only difference is that we gave them a hearing aid that was functioning within specifications and took them out of their devices that were not meeting specifications. But again, they were not aware that they were not hearing as good as they should have. So that's one of my concerns with all of this, is that there's no requirement to have additional testing or anything like that done in these devices. You could technically receive devices and a week later, they're not meeting these specification requirements anymore, is what it is. So they also must be designed to ensure proper physical fit. So when you look at the maximum insertion depth into the ear canal and an ear tip made out of atraumatic materials, meaning like a rubber dome, something like that, something that won't cause trauma to the ear canal or eardrum. And there has to be a way to determine if there's a proper physical fit, whether it's with a measurement tool or some kind of signal testing through an app or something like that. But the other thing here is that they are explicit in stating that these are not for individuals below the age of 18, but they do not support, they said this in there, they do not support the requirement of proof of age, because this could impede delivery of OTC hearing aids or reduce number of willing sellers of these OTC hearing aids. And this means that they don't truly intend to regulate if these devices are sold to individuals that are below the age of 18. And it would be very interesting to see like the federal and state governments say, you know what, maybe if they feel this way about OTC hearing aids, they should remove any age limitations, not age limitations, they should remove any type of proof of age when individuals are purchasing cigarettes or alcohol. Because hey, if you burden these companies from having to ask for proof of age, it could be bad for the tobacco and alcohol companies, and it would be inconvenient for any individual over the age of 18 or 21 respectively. So when you kind of look at it from that perspective, it's kind of like that's just ridiculous to not require any kind of proof of age to be able to get these particular devices. I have questions all the time that come in from parents asking, hey, can I order the Bose sound control hearing aids for my 5-year-old? Or can I just have my 3-year-old wear these Apple AirPods in transparency mode with headphone accommodations? And I'm like, no, you cannot. That's ridiculous. Do not do that. That would technically make you a bad parent. You need to actually go and get your child properly treated with hearing aids, and there are plenty, if you can't afford it, there are plenty of state-run organizations and insurances and things like that that will get your child proper hearing treatment. So I just don't like the idea that they're not going to require any kind of age or proof of age, and to use the excuse that it'd be bad for the manufacturers just seems completely ridiculous to me. Nonetheless, I'll move on. They are going to repeal the medical evaluation requirement to obtain hearing aids. Now, to be fair, the FDA already said years ago that they're just not going to enforce it, but this is going to officially repeal it. If I am reading this proposal correctly, these FDA guidelines will supersede any state laws requiring hearing aid dispensing, at least when it comes to OTC hearing aids. So that's what makes me think that me being a hearing care professional, I'd still be able to dispense them even if I don't test patients to dispense them, because part of my Arizona state licensure requirement is that if I dispense hearing aids, I have to provide a hearing test for an individual or have a hearing test like within the past 6 months in order to dispense devices to an individual. And so technically OTC dispensing, if I were to sell OTC hearing aids, I would be in violation of my state licensure laws. So with this preemption, which I'll put up here, no state or local government shall establish or continue in effect any law, regulation, order, or other requirement specifically related to hearing products that would restrict or interfere with the servicing, marketing, sale, dispensing, use, customer support, or distribution of OTC hearing aids through in-person transactions by mail or online that is different from, in addition to, or otherwise not identical to the regulations issued under Section 709B of the FDA Reauthorization Act of 2017, including any state or local requirement for the supervision, prescription, or other order, involvement, or intervention of a licensed person for consumers to access OTC hearing aids. So that just kind of reinforces my belief that I would be able to, but once these final rules come out, I'm going to have a lawyer look at them to see if I can legally dispense OTC hearing aids being a licensed hearing care professional. And if I'm not, then maybe I'll just let my license lapse and I'll just start dispensing OTC hearing aids instead and not have to abide by any state laws. That would be kind of cool, actually, nonetheless. All right, this document also proposes a realignment of hearing aid classification regulations, grouping prescription hearing aids with OTC hearing aids in the same air conduction category. You would have a bone conduction category and a tympanic membrane contact category. Do you like my air quotes? Nonetheless, it's late. My throat is sore already because I'm talking like, I don't know how many words a minute, a lot of words a minute. But anyway, they're just going to entirely kind of like combine prescription hearing aids with self-fitting OTC hearing aids and then leave these other two categories in their own categories of devices. Now, does that have a significant impact on anything? I'm not really sure as of yet. Okay, so when will these guidelines take effect? Well, right now we are in the 90-day comment period, which may take some time. The 90-day comment period, this is when you can actually submit your comments, when all the industry players, the manufacturers, the consumers, the audiologists, the hearing instrument specialists, the otolaryngologists, whoever, the primary care physicians, anybody can submit their comments about these guidelines if anyone's psychotic enough to read through them like I was. And then they will I presume that it will take some time for them to review all of these. I don't know what that time frame is. And then once they review all of them, they make whatever changes they're going to make, they are going to create a final rule. And then these guidelines will go into effect 60 days after the publication of the final rule. Now, the compliance date for hearing aids legally offered for sale prior to the effective date, meaning like the Bose sound control hearing aids, the compliance with the new requirements must be achieved within 180 days of the effective date of the final rule. So let's see here. What does that actually mean? Sorry, it's been a long day, but the compliance date for hearing aids legally offered for sale prior to the effective date. So the effective date will be 60 days after the final rule. So you have 180 days in addition to that. So like, what does that come out to? 240 days after the publication of the final rule, that all of these different manufacturers that are out there will have to comply if they are selling devices over the counter. And, if not, the FDA would consider taking action against such person or company under their usual enforcement policies. Now, the reason that I do not feel confident that the FDA is actually going to enforce this is that they haven't enforced anything up until this point. I mean, I think back in the day, maybe they shut down certain companies or said, hey, you can't say that in your marketing to hearing aid manufacturers. But the FDA issued a letter telling companies that they could not use OTC in their marketing or anything like that over the past 4 years. And a ton of these online hearing aid companies have been using it, and they haven't done anything about it. We actually even rallied consumers and professionals alike to take some of these really unscrupulous online hearing aid sellers and report them to the FDA and to the FTC in order to try to get them some kind of reprimand or something. And all we would get back is this form letter saying, all these manufacturers have been warned that they should not do this and blah, 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 basically saying that they didn't do anything to any of these particular companies. So I just have very little faith that these over-the-counter hearing aid guidelines are going to prevent these unscrupulous hearing aid dealers from doing what they're doing. I think it's going to make the honest hearing aid manufacturers incur costs, which I'll get into here in a minute. But I think the honest companies, like, in my opinion, like Bose, like the major hearing aid manufacturers that are going to start selling OTC hearing aids they're probably working on them already since this document came out, but they're all going to be having devices come out, but they were all going to be the ones who follow the guidelines, but there's going to be a lot of companies that don't, I believe. Nonetheless, I'll get off of that here for now because my ranting is taking way too long. Now, let's see here. So any device marketed as a hearing aid that is not a prescription hearing aid sold by a hearing care professional must have the 510(k) marketing approval from the FDA and meet the required meet the required criteria for an OTC device, or they will be in violation of these guidelines, meaning that there will be dozens of online hearing aid companies that will be in violation. I guarantee it. And everyone's going to still probably buy devices from them because they won't have a clue that they're in violation, and their devices will be pieces of junk like they currently are right now. All right, so the question does become, will the FDA actually enforce these guidelines? My bet is no, or they might pick some of the egregious ones and start harassing them, but I don't think ultimately that it's going to make much of a difference. Now, when it comes down to the economic impact, there is a table that shows the benefits and the costs. The costs appear to be extremely low because there are certain costs that are associated with relabeling and kind of doing all the administrative side of things when it comes down to it. But the benefits are extremely high. I think that it could potentially lead to a lot more money created in the hearing aid manufacturing world. I think that it could lead to more individuals saving money on hearing treatment, which would be considered a benefit. And I think that with this cost-benefit analysis that they've done, it seems as though economically it could be a positive thing at the end of the day. When you look at when readers came out, how it impacted optometry, it actually made optometry more profitable, meaning individuals were going and getting readers over the counter, and they're like, yeah, these are better, but you know what? I think I need even more than this. They kind of got a taste for seeing better and reading better, and now they wanted to go see an optometrist and purchase an actual legitimate prescription for eyeglasses. So I think the same thing's going to happen in the hearing aid industry and the profession of audiology and hearing instruments dispensing. So what's the environmental impact? They had to do an analysis of this. They do not suspect that there will be a huge environmental impact. When you think about it, individuals purchasing electronic devices that last them a couple of years and then they go into a landfill, hearing aids are pretty small, so it's probably not going to have that much of an impact environmentally. Like I mentioned before, there will be a cost of relabeling, record keeping, and third-party disclosure burden on manufacturers, and they estimate that these costs could exceed $10 million and more when you look at it, but it will largely be a one-time cost to kind of shift everything around. One thing that I found interesting just by reading this document is that there are currently 105 firms that manufacture air conduction hearing aids with an average of 8 products that would need to be relabeling after these changes. So that means, and I talk about this all the time, there are hundreds, almost in this case, 840 hearing aids that are currently on the market right now. And how much research have you done on hearing aids? I spend my entire life as of 2017, probably closer to 2012 when I got into this profession in school and all that, paying attention and learning as much as I can about every single possible hearing aid that I can identify. And I can tell you that I have not even come close to learning about the capabilities of 840 different hearing aids that are available on the market right now, which blows my mind because I literally, like I said, I spend all my time either treating patients for hearing loss, running and cycling, or learning about hearing aids, hearing aid research in general about hearing loss, and I have not even come anywhere close to knowing everything that there is to know about the different hearing aids on the market right now. So that right there is a really quick deep dive into all the aspects of these proposed guidelines. So what I highly recommend that you do is that you go through the different sections of this document. If this is something that's important to you, if you're a consumer, if you're a hearing care professional, and there's things that you would like to see happen inside of the OTC market, this is the time that you have to voice your opinion. No more posting, what you think online. Like, actually write a letter and say what you feel about this to the people creating this so you can get what you want. If you don't do it and then you complain about what it is after it's published, well, you had your chance, right? It's kind of like voting. If you don't vote, you can't complain. At least that's what people say. People complain regardless, but whatever. Take this opportunity in the next 90 days to little by little go through this 114-page document and express your thoughts and things that you would like to see and send them in. Again, I will have linked in the description below the ways that you can submit your comments electronically, or you can mail them in via letter if you're not comfortable doing things electronically. All right? So, at the end of the day, I truly believe that we are on the right track. I'm kind of excited to kind of see what this does with the hearing aid world. I mean, if anybody is excited, it's going to be someone who's been talking about this stuff for the last 4 years. And so this is about to bring a whole bunch of different topics that I can bring up on my channel, a whole bunch of different devices that I can review and post reviews on and do all of that. And so I'm just like super, super excited for this. I can understand why some people would be stressed out by it, hearing care professionals, particularly if they feel like their entire livelihood is going to go away. But like I mentioned actually in my vlog last week, is that you either provide additional value above and beyond what OTC hearing aids can provide, or you don't deserve to be in this profession anyway, right? And yes, there will be some individuals who get screwed over, consumers who get screwed over from OTC hearing aids and feel like that hearing treatment just won't work for them, and they'll never come in and see a hearing care professional, and they will live their lives depressed because they can't hear. And there is always going to be collateral damage when it comes to that. And if you're watching this video, please understand that whatever happens with OTC hearing aids, there is always a hearing loss treatment option that will be effective for you. You just have to figure out which one it is, and you have to go to someone who can make sure that you get the most out of your hearing treatment. So that is my soapbox for this evening. I have no idea how long it took to record this. I think it's like a 45-minute video. This is going to cost me a lot of money to get it captioned. Hopefully it'll be done by tomorrow morning when I want to post this video. But if you guys enjoyed my synopsis of the proposed guidelines for over-the-counter hearing aids, again, if you could give me a thumbs up, it does me a ton of benefit in getting these videos in front of a larger audience. But as always, guys, I'll see you next week.